Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
If you're interested in serving on your local Federal Subsistence Regional Advisory Council, the deadline to apply is Friday, February 3rd. Call 1-800-478-1456 for more information.
The National Weather Service.
And good Tuesday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on the 17th of January. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date on your local weather situation. You can do that with the Alaska Weather Information Line at 800-472-0391. And you can always find this information online 24 hours a day at weather.gov/Alaska, weather.gov/Fairbanks, weather.gov/Juneau, or weather.gov/Anchorage. And of course, many of you know you can always get that same information at weather.gov at AAWU. That's short for the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit, which will provide your flying conditions for the next couple days. All this information is constantly updated, and we're going to take a sneak peek into it right now. Here's a look at the hazardous weather across Southeast. Nothing going right now, but more rain is on the way for you tonight after temperatures have been fairly warm. And in fact, temps there in Annette today reached about 50 degrees or so. If you compare that to what we saw out in McGrath today, at about 51 below this morning, that's a 100-degree difference from McGrath to Annette. That is a tremendous spread in temperatures, and that cold is going to win. And because of that, we've got a number of areas lit up tonight across the Alaska Range and the northern Susitna Valley, where wind chill advisories are posted. Now, most of that is going to be in the more windy places there. That means the passes, and wind chill values there could drop to about 40 below if you're moving through some of the passes there or around the DOT camps. So just be extra careful there, and remember that at levels that cold, it only takes a few seconds, maybe a minute or two, to start freezing your flesh. And that sounds pretty scary and extreme, but this is Alaska, this is wintertime, and this is about as cold as things get around here. So just be on your guard and make sure that you are prepared in many ways. Lots of layers, limit your time outside, limit your exposure opportunities, and have a backup plan just in case something's not working out just right. And make sure if you're traveling, people know you're coming and you're going. Here's a look up north and across the Brooks Range and the North Slope. We are talking about wind chill advisories there as well. Now, the coldest of those will be along the Brooks Range, looking at levels between 50 and 55 below at their greatest extent. So this will go until about midnight to about 6 o'clock in the morning for those colder values there, and that does include the Chukchi Seacoast and the northern part of the Seward Peninsula. So big cold in many places across Alaska, and it will stay cold for the next several days. Here's a look at the satellite picture now, and you can see the overall trend. Moisture is still working its way towards southeast. Had some breaks today where mild weather was seen around Ketchikan and Annette and points northward. Another round of moisture is working its way across the Gulf, though, and that is going to bring rain back into southeast weather picture. Conditions are drying up, though, across most of the central and western part of the interior and out towards southwest, but a lot of unsettled weather continues across the Bering Sea, and because of that, snow showers will still be an issue, trying to come and go from Nome to St. Lawrence Island or through parts of the central and western Aleutians, even St. Paul, Nunivak Island. You're still looking at snow showers there. And it looks like there will be some wetter weather trying to work its way into the northern Gulf as we move toward the end of the week. But for now, the cold air is really the dominant force there, as we're still seeing some kind of carryover from snow showers kind of slopping back over to the North Slope here. All of this is going to kind of get flushed out a little bit as more and more of that cold air moves in. The big question, though, is how much cloud cover is going to remain even in very isolated or smaller scale locations. So let's just say over Fairbanks. If you have clouds sitting over Fairbanks tonight, that could limit how cold those temperatures get, maybe by 10, 15, even 20 degrees. It makes a huge difference. Even if it's just one or two clouds, it can have a really big impact on a really small area there. So just keep that in mind as you're looking at some of these temperatures as we come up on them here in just a few minutes. But in the meantime, the overall flow across the eastern Gulf is from the south and southwest. Most of Alaska at this point is being wrapped into that western and northern part of low pressure in the circulation that's bringing that cold weather our way. So surprising is that the high pressure system is not super robust. We're not talking about a 1050 high. It's just cold stuff, 1,002 millibars there across the middle Yukon Valley. You can see low pressure out across the west. Some of that is producing a few areas of snow showers. Most of what you're seeing there across the north slope is probably ice fog and diamond dust. We're really not talking about a substantial snow at this point. There has been a little bit of snow around Prince William Sound and rain showers out to sea, and rain has been trying to work its way back into the southern parts of southeastern Alaska this afternoon. As we get into tonight, it looks like rain will be back in your weather picture, and there will be some higher elevation snow, but it does look like most areas are going to be dealing with wet weather at sea level there. So that's good news if you're still enjoying the warm weather where you are. In fact, I think I saw a picture of somebody's green grass around the Juneau area today, which is pretty amazing considering what looks like now in Anchorage, which is about 1.5 feet of snow in some places there. Many parts of the interior will be clearing out again, save for some isolated or patchy fog. That will have a big difference on your temperatures, but overall we are expecting a generally clear sky for many across parts of the interior. And then northward, a little better chance of cloud cover, some isolated areas of blowing snow, maybe some flurries there, or diamond dust across the north slope, but just really nasty wind chills, 50 to 55 below again across some parts of the eastern Beaufort Seacoast. Across St. Lawrence Island down into the Aleutians, low pressure there working across the central chain at 985 millibars will continue working its way eastward and deepening a little bit more as it gets towards St. Paul and St. George Island. Snow showers behind that with that northerly flow. And this is a stationary front. You can see the cold air indicated by the blue triangles pointing its direction southward, and the warm air with the little half circles here lifting northward, kind of looks like a sun. This is the line of that really big cold, and as you'll watch this map and the next map, it's going to kind of sag a little bit more. It's not a true stationary front where it's absolutely parked on the mark. It's not moving. It's kind of drifting and kind of oozing its way out to sea a little bit here, and this cold air wants to do that. Remember, this is some of the densest, coldest air in the northern hemisphere right now, and all it wants to do is spin out to the edge. If you think about the Earth as a record, now I'm just going to take some of you to the Wayback Machine here, let's say even a compact disc, and you spin that around, you put a marble in the middle representing that cold, dense air, that marble is going to spin out to the edge because of the centrifugal force. The Earth is spinning, the cold air is that dense marble, and it wants to go toward the equator. Now that's just a little bit of meteorology 101 for you there, but that is why this air wants to move southward across south central and southwest Alaska and eventually trying to creep its way into southeastern Alaska. We'll see how much of that you get. Low pressure will sit just off of Sitka on Wednesday at 971 millibars. Trying to work in some rain and snow there, and as we get into Thursday, look, that line has crept a little bit further south once again. Periods of rain and snow should be expected there. Probably gradually kind of leaning its way back over toward rain as you go through the day on Wednesday, and then you can see a better chance of a mix as you get into Thursday for the capital city and points westward. I'm still looking at rain for Ketchikan and Net, Hyder and Klawock as well. Now up north, high pressure still in charge of the interior. Underneath that, there may be some clouds. There's even some snow showers. Most of that is still going to be very isolated, very fine snowflakes, but a better chance for accumulating snow just east of the Alcan border. So if you got some driving plans, keep an eye on the weather conditions there if you're driving out to Whitehorse or further east and south. South and western Alaska, looking at snow showers there as this next weather system is going to try and cut in on this cold air. The cold air doesn't want to move, but the moisture is going to force its way in, and the result of that should be some snow showers across southwestern Alaska, the Akpen, and out toward the central and eastern chain. And the winds will probably come up a little bit more for the central and western chain as well. Gales out there tonight. Here's a look at the forecast. We'll start with temperatures actually. 30s and 40s for southeast today. Again, we saw high temps around a net up to about 50 degrees in Ketchikan, and mid-30s there for Juneau, above freezing. Cordova was 25. Homer and Seward in the low teens, 1 in Kenai, 1 for Anchorage. Up into the Susitna Valley, Talkeetna 3 below. And up toward Fairbanks, 29 below, 27 below in Eagle, 17 below around Fort Yukon, anywhere from 10 to 20, even 36 below there as you get out around Point Hope. Point Lay and the Kotzebue Sound region, anywhere from 15 to 30 below around Kotzebue, 22 below for Nome, Galena 33 below, Ruby just miserable cold there. McGrath was down to 51 below, I believe, this morning, and could do it again tonight. 36 below at 3 o'clock. 11 below in Bethel. Savunga was 1 below. Same goes for Nunivak Island out around Lake Iliamna, anywhere from 10 to 15 below most areas there. About 20 degrees for Kodiak Island on either end. Pilot Point Port Haydn, temps in the around 0 to about the mid-teens as you head down through a Cold Bay and Falls Pass. Sandpoint was 19, 23 in St. Paul, and 20s and 30s for the central and western chain. Big, big cold. Overnight low temperatures will again drop to about 40 to 50 below for parts of the Tanana Valley, out toward Galena, McGrath, places out around Sparrowvon, Grayling, Russian Mission, 22 below for Unalakleet, Shaktoolik not too far behind, 25 below there at Nome, about the same there in Barrow. And again, these temperatures are going to they're going to fluctuate. It could even be 5 to 10 degrees if you just get just a little whiff of a cloud cover or perhaps just a minor breeze for just a few minutes. Those temperatures will be dramatically different there. So this is our kind of our best guess from earlier today. 38 degrees below around Eagle, 35 below in Northway. South Central, you could be seeing temperatures around the Anchorage area at 10 below. If you've got a flight coming in tomorrow morning or plan to bring the plane in, it is going to be much colder than it was this morning. 12 above in Kodiak. Southeast, you're looking at temps in the 20s and 30s. And look at you in Ketchikan and Annette. Closer to 40 degrees tomorrow. Enjoy that. 25 below in Nome, and again, the Aleutians looking at 25 to about 30 degrees above. High temps tomorrow, above freezing for many out in the chain, and the Alaska Peninsula, not quite. Looks like temps mostly in the teens and 20s tomorrow. South Central, sub-zero for highs for many areas, including Anchorage and the Matanuska and Susitna Valleys. For Southeast, 30s and 40s there. For the interior, low to mid 30s, below 0 for high temps there around Fairbanks there. So anywhere from about 30 to 40 below. Fort Yukon, 34 below, 12 below in Barrow. Kaktovik, about 20 below, 10 below in Nome. Southwest and Bethel, you're about 5 to 10 below. So again, be careful out in the cold. Pay attention to how you're feeling and make sure you dress in layers and limit your exposure outside. On to flying weather. IFR conditions across the North Slope, across Kotzebue Sound, and across the northern part of the YK Delta. St. Matthew and the Pribilofs looking at MVFR to IFR conditions. The central chain and in the north of southeast, you're looking at Haines and Skagway with IFR conditions at a start tomorrow, probably lingering around that level as we get into the afternoon. MVFR for more parts of southeast throughout the day. MVFR creeps into the middle Yukon Valley. IFR lingers across the North Slope and St. Lawrence Island. And the Pribilofs looking at IFR all the way into areas just west of Nikolsky. South Central, most of the interior and southwest really still looking at VFR conditions. Here's your pass conditions. Anaktuvik and Anigan Pass looking at MVFR conditions throughout the day. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, Rainy Pass, and Windy Pass all expected to be VFR throughout the day. Isabel Pass, visual flight rules should continue. Mentasta Pass starts at IFR, but improvement throughout the day to MVFR. Tanita Pass, we expect to see VFR, and Portage Pass, VFR conditions there. Chilkoot and White Pass looking like IFR through most of the day. Freezing levels, obviously the cold's intact, but over southeastern Alaska, levels there aloft anywhere from 2 to about 4,000 feet. As far as icing potential goes, above 3,000 feet seems to be a little bit of a greater risk there for light to isolated moderate across parts of the Panhandle. And hit and miss as you get into the Copper River Basin closer to the Wrangell-St. Elias region, as well as the Pribilofs above 2,000 feet and the central chain, including Nikolsky out toward Dutch Harbor on Alaska. Most of the central and western interior and north right now doesn't have a significant risk of increased icing there, but again, it will be awfully cold, so any residual moisture out there could present a problem. Tomorrow's jet stream has that superhighway of weather well south, and of course that allows that cold to drop south across Alaska and the west coast, especially into the Bering Sea, with southwesterlies working over extreme southern parts of southeast, and that, my friends, is why you are warm in Ketchikan and Annette. At 9,000 feet, we have several areas of low pressure across south central, across the Seward Peninsula, and across the southern Bering Sea. The overall flow is bringing that north and easterly wind across the western Bering about 20 to 30 knots. Westerlies across the Gulf at around 25 knots, and weak southerlies working in across southeastern Alaska around 10 to 20 knots there with that northeast flow for the North Slope around 10 to 20. A little bit more of a lighter easterly flow working across the North Slope at 3,000 feet. Look at that northwesterly flow working across the Barren Islands, the Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island, and Bristol Bay, 20 to 30 knots there. That will make for some gusty winds and keep the cold on coming as you move through the next couple days. Turbulence, hit and miss chop across the Kenai Peninsula, the Barrens, and into Kodiak Island, around Sand Point up toward Chignik, and around the eastern and central Aleutians below 4,000 feet. Also watching for some bumps across central and southern parts of southeast and the western tip of the Seward Peninsula for your Wednesday, all below 4,000 feet. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back with a sea ice edge update as well as your marine weather. Stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jessica Cherry.
And I'm Forrest Kirst, a commercial pilot.
And today we're going to talk about an experiment we're doing using a small aircraft where we've mounted a sensor package to the aircraft to measure temperature, humidity, and pressure, as well as elevation and longitude and latitude of the airplane. And with the package, we're going to sample the local winter inversion here in Fairbanks, Alaska. And an inversion is where you have the surface atmosphere that's closest to the land is colder than the atmosphere above it, which is the opposite of normal conditions throughout the year throughout North America. Forrest, maybe you could tell us more about how a pilot experiences an inversion during the wintertime.
On the ground during our pre-flight, it's very cold out. This morning it's minus 28 centigrade, which is about minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit. So doing our pre-flight, it's extremely cold, hard on the airplane, hard on the people. For flying at the colder temperatures for doing these experiments, we're somewhere between minus 20 and minus 40 degrees. So we have to dress for that temperature inside the airplane as well as when we're outside of the airplane. When we're doing our pre-flight, we have to be extremely careful not to damage the plastic parts on the outside of the airplane. Extremely careful not to touch the metal parts with our fingers because we'll get contact frostbite. And we have to be real careful just with everything because it's just so cold. We have to dress as if we're going to be outdoors the whole time, and we use the aircraft heater to make it comfortable in our clothes and so we can see out the window. When we get the airplane running and we do our takeoff roll, we have increased engine performance and increased lift because of the colder, denser air. So we get off the ground earlier and have a better climb rate. When we reach the inversion layer, quite often the windows will fog up. The airplane's performance will decrease slightly because it's warmer air, produces less lift, and it produces less power from the engine.
When an inversion is present, air doesn't move anywhere, especially it doesn't want to move up. And so the classic look there is the steam out of the power plant or automobile exhaust, any kind of wood smoke or such, will come out of a chimney and then just flatten out and not move up. And if it moves horizontally at all, it's very slow, just creeping along. When you see that kind of lack of air movement, especially when there's clear skies, the sun is maybe low on the horizon, that is an inversion day in interior Alaska.
The reason it is so cool in the far north during winter is that the incoming radiation is at such a low angle. Now, as the atmosphere begins to cool in late fall, we start to get snowfall, which causes the land surface to be white, and light colors reflect incoming radiation right back, which causes additional cooling. And it's the reason we have a persistent inversion from late fall through early spring here in Fairbanks.
To get a radiation inversion to form, you need clear or mostly clear skies. You need no wind or very little wind down at the surface. And you need to have the sun under the horizon or high noon in December such that even if the sun is up, it's so low it doesn't really feed in any energy. When those three things happen, you lose heat to space from the surface of the Earth, but you're not getting any new heat in. And you get a very cold layer of air hugging the ground, cold, dense air that just lays down in the bottom of the valley. That's the classic radiation inversion setup.
So as we do our experiment with the aircraft, we're going to use a similar instrumentation package as is mounted on the standard weather balloons. We're going to measure temperature profiles, relative humidity, and pressure. And we're also going to tie the sensor package into a GPS unit, a global positioning system unit, so we know where the aircraft is located relative to the topography. So now I want to tell you about the instrument package that we're using on the aircraft. First of all, we use a NiCad 12-volt battery to power the data logger and the instruments. The data logger records the output from the meteorological sensors, which here include a temperature and relative humidity sensor and a pressure transmitter, which works like a barometer to measure atmospheric pressure. This particular one is going to plug into the static port in the aircraft, which also helps power some of the aircraft instruments. Finally, we have the Global Positioning System computer, which measures the latitude, longitude, and altitude of the aircraft. This one has an accuracy of about 10 meters, which is perfectly fine for what we're trying to do here. Here's a picture of our temperature and relative humidity sensor installed on the aircraft. So this is an FAA approved plate here mounted to the window. And we want the temperature sensor mounted towards the aft of the aircraft so we don't get air rushing in and it has a chance to equilibrate to the environmental conditions. And then finally, our pressure sensor is connected to this static port in the airplane, which again just measures the ambient pressure of the atmosphere where it hits this little hole in the plane. That's piped back into our pressure sensor inside. So one of the things that we're going to go out and do today is that we're going to attach the sensor package to the aircraft, and then Forrest is going to take off from Fairbanks International.
To get repeatability for the data, we flew in and out of Fairbanks International, Nenana Airport, Ladd Army Airfield, and Eielson Airfield. So we do a very slow climb up through the inversion layer, climbing at about 100 feet per minute. Just very slow climb to the top of the inversion, find out where the ceiling is, and then once we're at the ceiling of the inversion, we do very slow porpoising up and down through the inversion to see if it's stable, if it's got different characteristics throughout it. Then we get to the next airport and we do a very slow descent into the airport at about 100 feet per minute, all the way to the ground.
And there's going to be an inversion the next couple of days across a good part of central and western sections of the interior. Here's a look at sea surface temperatures, and look for the really deep purple or indigo colors here across the coastal areas. Most of that already has ice on it, but right there along the edge is where a lot of that's going to form. The question is, how much is that wind going to lay down in the next couple of days, and how fast will that edge expand? Here's where it is now. And you can see we got a good look around St. Lawrence Island, and good news for the communities around Little and Big Diomede, how to go around St. Lawrence Island, Gamble and Savunga included. It looks like the ice has moved up closer to the coast there, so the threat for more heavy freezing spray probably will not be in your area for a while there as long as the ice is present. The ice continues to expand slowly to the south and west now with cold air and the motion of that wind actually moving the ice and forming more. Here's a look at the forecast now for southeast. Southeasterly winds on the inside, 20 to 25 with 4 to 9 foot seas higher in the Clarence Strait, of course, and in the Lynn Canal, northerly or southerlies at 20 knots with a 4 foot sea. Across the northern outer coast, northwesterlies wrapping into just about Sitka, 25 knots with an 8 to 9 foot sea in south, and easterly winds wrapping into low pressure, 12 to 14 foot seas there on the outside south of Sitka. For Thursday, southeasterlies continue on the inside for most areas except the Lynn Canal, 25 knots with a 5 foot sea, and the onshore flow starts to pick up 20 to 25 with 15 to 17 foot seas there south of Cross Sound all the way down toward Craig and Klawock and the Dixon entrance for Thursday. For south central, light and variable winds across the northern Cook Inlet with ice in place. Northerlies south of Cowgan Island, 15 knots with a 3 foot sea and ice-free waters, and northwesterlies moving over the Barren Islands. A little bit stronger there at 35 to 40 knots with 10 to 14 foot seas. Northwesterlies inside of Prince William Sound and across the northern Gulf at about 20 to 30 knots with 4 to 9 foot seas in that area. By Thursday, the northwesterlies continue in the same spots in the northwestern Gulf. North and easterly winds pick up a little bit more over Cook Inlet, and northwesterlies for the Barren Islands, 25 to 35 knots with 14 foot seas east of the Barren Islands and 11 foot seas east of Kodiak Island on a 25 knot wind. For the Alaska Peninsula and Bristol Bay, a northeasterly wind will be blowing down the Bering Sea coast, 15 knots with a 2 foot sea and ice-free waters, and watch for heavy freezing spray in the area. Northerlies across the North Pacific, 25 knots with a 10 to 11 foot sea on Wednesday. Reversing course on Thursday, southerlies, 25 knots with a 9 to 10 foot sea there. Southeasterlies in Bristol Bay, 6 foot seas in the ice-free waters and 9 foot seas down the Bering Sea coast. And again, freezing spray will still be an issue as we go through the rest of the week with the cold air in place. Westerlies for the central chain as we look at Wednesday, 35 knots with an 11 to 14 foot sea in the Bering, 14 to 15 feet across the Pacific coast, and southeasterlies moving over the eastern Aleutians, northwesterlies over the western Aleutians, 25 to 35 knots there with 10 foot seas on Wednesday. Seas diminish a little bit out in the west on Thursday, 20 knots from the north and west with 30 knots over Kiska, and west and northwesterlies for the central chain, 15 knots for Adak and Atka in the Bering Sea coast, 14 foot seas are expected for Nikolsky to Unalaska on a southwesterly flow, and north and westerly winds continue for the Pacific coast, 30 knots with an 11 to 13 foot sea on Thursday. For the west coast, northerlies coming over St. Lawrence Island, but remember this now has ice covering up, so that's going to be a huge improvement for you, even though it will be cold. Northeasterlies working over St. Matthew and north of Nunivak Island over the ice there. 9 foot seas around St. Matthew Island, watching for heavy freezing spray. Southeasterlies in the Kuskokwim Delta and over the Pribilofs at 35 knots with a 15-foot sea on Wednesday. For Thursday, northerly winds start to win out the Bering Sea. North and easterly winds in all areas there. 20 knots around St. Lawrence Island, 30 knots for St. Matthew and north of Nunivak Island, 30 knots for the Kuskokwim Delta on the north wind, 10-foot seas there, and 17-foot seas for St. Paul and St. George on a 35-knot wind from the north and east. For the North Slope, light winds in all areas, 5 to 15 knots generally from the north. A westerly flow for the eastern Beaufort Seacoast on Wednesday, and light winds continue on Thursday with a north and northwesterly flow south of Cape Lisburne into the outside waters of Kotzebue Sound at 15 knots for your Thursday. Recapping tonight's weather, the big story is rain for southeast, eventually rain and snow, and then back to rain. But even bigger is the big cold for the northern and western interior. You're talking about wind chill values that could be as cold as 50 to 55 below, especially in mountain passes. And some of that extends all the way into the Alaska range, where areas around the northern Susitna Valley and the eastern Alaska range could be talking about wind chills down to 40 below. So be careful, layer up, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX Brief for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
If you're interested in serving on your local Federal Subsistence Regional Advisory Council, the deadline to apply is Friday, February 3rd. Email subsistence@fws.gov for more information.